Welcome back to the Lessons for Tomorrow podcast, the motivational poster in your ear. I'm your guest host, Stephen LaGow, partner director here at AmericanEagle.com. In this episode, we're going to be diving into the evolution of DXPs, every stop from portals to DXP as a service. To help discuss this, I'm joined by two very special guest speakers from our partner, Liferay. We have Wes Kempa, who's a lead sales engineer. Wes is a skilled technologist with a focus on mentoring and inspiring teams. He's held many different roles from a developer all the way up to a director and is currently managing a team of technical sales engineers. We also have Glenn Saylor, Director of North American Channel Sales. Glenn joined Liferay in 2010 to help build mutual profitable relationships with Liferay's global service partners. He's currently responsible for the North American channel strategy and manages a team of channel account managers covering all of North America. He has over 24 years of technical and business experience in the software industry. Gentlemen, a pleasure to have you. Thanks for coming on.
Thank you, Stephen.
A pleasure.
Yeah, it's exciting. We've been in the AmericanEagle.com headquarters with the Liferay folks all day today, and this is sort of capping our day. And excited to have this conversation. I know. Some of the things that we've been poking around today and making sure that our relationship as partners moving forward is set in stone. But one of the things that continues to come up is where DXPs and digital experience platforms are moving. I know one of the from back in the day, core CMSs to WEMs, these web experience management tools, and now we're moving into DXPs and what comes after that. So happy to dive in and dissect this conversation with you folks. I know that you both have been in the space for a long time and have seen a lot of different versions of what a CMS or a DXP are. Don't want to date anybody, but what's the first thing you were working on?
Thinking back and preparing for this podcast, it really gave me a chance to look back on my 20 years in the industry. And before that, I was working in print design, of all things. What struck me back then is I had the utmost respect for print designers. They were meticulous. They could get things absolutely right, but it wasn't dynamic. It wasn't intuitive. It was locked in as soon as you printed it. So I realized that was not for me. So through that evolution, when I got my hands on a portal technology like Liferay, we were working in behavioral healthcare at the time, and we were providing videos for people with problems with depression or sleep issues. And one of the first jobs that I had was working with the way that people worked with that system, so that if they were signed up for different programs, they would see different banners on the page. And that was a big wow factor to me, that we could tailor those experiences to those users, both securely to make sure they couldn't get access to programs they didn't have access to or didn't pay for, but also that flexibility of the system. And that's when I fell in love with the product.
It's good stuff. How about you, Glenn?
So I can date myself pretty far back too. If you look at, I was talking about this earlier, in college, one of the first programming classes I took was COBOL, right? So, what's even the web and what's HTML? I've lived through that, I guess. So I don't know if that's something to brag about, but, honestly, getting out, it was HTML. It was developing a lot in like Notepad, right?
Yeah.
So there was not a lot of the editors or CMS tools, you should say, or whatever. My probably first formal introduction to any type of CMS would be like a front page, to when finally we were using Cold Fusion. One of the last jobs that I had as an e-commerce manager. So, but with that, Cold Fusion was nice, and it allowed for a lot of reuse in certain aspects, and integrated well with a lot of the other Adobe products too once they purchased it. But it allowed. One thing it struggled with was, good with content, good with HTML. It took a developer to do it. End users were not able to do that. And I'd say the other struggle with it was you had to build everything else around it. So, to Wes's point, when you look at a portal and what it offers, as far as being able to authenticate users and log in and get things, that functionality was not there. So we built that from scratch.
Sure.
In fact, we finalized that entire project with building the e-commerce engine from scratch. So it was just an utter nightmare. I mean, I'm glad that system is not available anymore, and we've modernized, on new tools or whatever. But that's kind of my past with CMS to now, and we did replace that with a solution similar to Liferay. So yeah,
it's funny. I not a technical background myself, although when I was in middle school, I could HTML the hell out of one of those Zanga pages, or MySpace page back in the day. Dropping your own backgrounds in, and overriding the standard sounds that you can have. It's interesting. CMS happens before Google, right? There was always a need for these content management systems. I remember, as a kid, early 90s. The OregonTrail.com, and those were what sites were, right? It was a flat file HTML, and there was no experience. The page was the page. Walk me through the first time you guys realized that experience were going to be more individualized rather than sort of this is what the site is. This is my website, and sort of what was there a spark there, or something that that triggered you to say, oh, this is going to be fun.
I spent a lot of years developing in Flash and Flex, and although it was very vibrant, very engaging at times, it was really locked in. You really didn't have a good understanding of the user, what that user expected in their experience. It's more like a TV show. You're showing them a string of clips in which they have to ingest, and then at the end of those string of clips, then you have some interaction that they might be working with. So as far as the personalization aspect, it really came to a point in which I was working with businesses, much like the behavioral healthcare project that was mentioned, in which you have various types of users and roles in a system, and you have to deliver an experience. At that point, it was through authentication. Authentication, you have known users. Those users have attributes of which you can then tailor the experience to. When it became to those key business use cases, that's when it really was required that you provided a experience that met the expectation of those end users.
Sure. What about you?
I'd say my biggest experience with that was, so I worked for a large casket company. I'm from Batesville, Indiana, so the name kind of gives that away. But working for that company, what we did, and part of that, the sites I was telling you about, where we really getting introduced to CMS helped us a lot because we were building out HTML and stuff. We were building websites for our customers, which were funeral homes.
Sure.
Right. So we did not sell to the public. We sold through funeral homes. They were our distributors. So they needed these websites, which they added online ordering to eventually and everything. So we kind of saw that progression. But what we first saw was, if you think about it from a funeral perspective, it's got to be highly customizable, right? Yeah. And
Can't miss.
Yeah. And they were constantly coming to us, to make a lot of those changes and everything. And what we quickly realized was we've got to give some of that functionality back to the users and allow them to create that content. Not only create that content, I think the other biggest thing that we saw added to CMSs that really helped was the ability to share it, right? So a common repository on a server where even competitors, could share things, reuse certain assets and everything. So that was my first experience with that.
Yeah, the way that you guys have sort of teed this up, this portal experience, this authenticated users, where I know, as I log in, I'm expecting XYZ, and I'm able to see that, I possess these attributes, and so does this person over here, and sort of what Liferay's core. Your heritage is in those portal experiences. And so, moving away from a CMS and just even those flat file HTML sites through Flash and into the CMSs, when, with these portals, I think that I'm interested to hear your perspective on, sort of the molding of why that became more and more useful, not just from a user experience, but like the individual user experience, but from an organization perspective, why this is an offering they wanted to provide, both to their customers and partners alike.
And we can talk about these things that happened, 10, 15 years ago, and with still maybe some sentiment over how we've changed through this process. Because in the case of an authenticated user, you might have 3 or 4 different roles that you're trying to meet, persona-based storytelling in a way, in which you're giving them what they need from a business standpoint. But there's so much more that's expected nowadays. Mm-hmm. Really now, it needs to be individualized, not just a group, not a role, that users, based on their interaction with search results or their clicks through the system, what pages or blogs they've interacted with or commerce items, that they expect you to remember that. And much like Netflix, in which over time where you're viewing videos and Netflix understands you, it's almost like it's expected that technology is paying attention and that it shows you things that are of value to you and doesn't waste your time in the ways that we were used to historically.
Netflix and Amazon ruined everything and made everything all better at the same time. I mean, it's one and the same. So from a business perspective, right? I mean, you want as an organization to be able to deliver those tailored experiences to people, and for a while, at least in my view, it seemed like the extensibility of front end personalization got a little unwieldy and more focusing on a logged in or authenticated experience might make more sense for folks. Have you guys seen anything similar to that in your travels?
Yeah, especially now in the day of, we talked about Amazon and the Facebooks and Google and everything, really creating this new age of expecting that customer experience, right? We're seeing that across all facets of the company. We see it a lot from a support perspective, right? So customer self-service is what we're seeing a lot in the industry right now. It's probably one of the biggest requests we get, incoming is how can, from a B2B to a B2C to a B2B2C, how can my end customer self-service themselves and roll back that cost, right? So there's a huge expense to supporting customers, and I think that's the biggest use case that we're seeing right now is how can I control those expenses? And it's not just how do I control those expenses, it's ultimately how do I make that customer happy, right? So we talk about Amazon and some of these companies and what they did, and I remember the first Amazon page when it was a bookstore only, to what it's come to. They did lead the way. People are expecting that, and again, what we're seeing now is it's all about the customer. So,
Right. I mean that individualized, that focus. It for a while it used to be groups. Wes, you were saying that before that these personas, this group of people need to see this. And we built out a couple versions of that. And these group of people need to see that. Now it's down to the individual. I might have the exact same role and the exact same, sort of end focus as somebody else, but I click on something differently and learn separately, right? So I think that one of the things that I'd be curious to hear your thoughts on are how best to sort of tailor recommendations in that sort of, knowing that we're still sort of in this portal focus right now, tailoring recommendations. There seems to be a nice debate on, clicks and attention and how do we quantify what should be next? Is it like folks? If you guys have any opinions on, should it be based on direct user action, or should we be doing a little bit more about, this person is like you and therefore they have done this. Should you also?
Well, I think that's what we'll see in the future, the increase of machine learning and AI helping support those things like that. But I would like to separate the authenticated user or known user from this type of tailoring, because it works well for security, making sure they can't get to things, or they're not allowed to get to things they shouldn't. That's still going to be important in business. That'll always be important. But as far as tailoring a user's interests, that has to go more along the lines of regardless if they're authenticated or not. And it could be from many different outcomes. We're benefited from a technology right now that if an author is populating content into the system, we can use tools that exist on the market today to auto-tag or auto-analyze, even things like images, to find the content of an image that represents something that is trackable.
Right.
And that's only going to get better over the coming years and more powerful, almost to a point where it might be even scary, I would think.
I think we're there in consumer tech, right? I mean, for all of us every day. I mean, I have an Alexa at home, and she turns on the lights, and she turns off the lights, and she plays music, and I'm using a she, and it's a device. We're at that point with consumer tech. Yeah. So, we're eventually inevitably going to be there with business as well. And Glenn, any thoughts there?
So, and kind of to the point you just about, it's it's crazy the level of personalization we're getting to, and kind of Wes brought up kind of the machine learning and the AI. I think that's great technology. I think there's a place in the world for it, but we can't overdo it.
Sure.
And I think even us, from a technology perspective, we've constantly got to be looking at that, right? I mean, we've got an entire InfoSec team, that's looking after, is it GDPR compliant? Are we allowed to ask for this? So, and back to personalization too. Yes, I think it's no longer groups. It is very highly personalized by individual, because what I want to share may not be what you want to share, right? And a lot of that too is the different generations we have. I'm the old school, kind of Gen X guy, right? And then we've got millennial plus, and I think we're willing to share data differently. You see it all over the place too. I think the new generation used to be more open to sharing a lot of stuff, but we're even seeing them pull back, with a lot of the data breaches you're seeing and stuff.
Right.
And yeah, it has to stay and continue that route of highly personal per individual.
Yeah, I mean it's there's always that marriage of could versus should when we're thinking about this AI and personalization. It's funny when you were mentioning that. One of my favorite scenes in one of my favorite shows, Parks and Rec, is when Ron Swanson's online and he realizes that they know who he is because he bought something and they know his address, so he throws the whole computer away, thinking that'll get him out of it. So, this architecture, right? We moved from a CMS to a portal where we're focusing on some of these authenticated experiences. But, even Gartner's driving this from a portal to DXP and what DXP is. And I know, we all know what that means. But I think it's interesting in that I hope it doesn't go by the wayside, just become alphabet soup. This is what a DXP could be. But from your perspective, sort of where do you think, at least at present, what should a DXP provide, and to whom and to where and from where?
Well, a DXP tends to be a fancy name for a bundle of technologies that can solve a lot of business problems quickly and efficiently. And I would think, and I strongly believe, that agility of DXPs to solve problems in a way that is more configuration over customization and opening up Dreamweaver or those old tools in which even Notepad to author those things is well behind us now. Although it might be education to some to know where we have come from. I think it's just going to continue to kind of speed up over time and improve and help enable business users that can do things with no code.
Yeah.
And I know low code, no code is brought up on occasion, but really a business user is not going to want to type syntax at any point. They want to click or click and drag and build something that might tailor search results or provide a good experience or put users into segments in which they can take some important action on cross-selling or upselling a product.
Yeah, I like it. I mean, it's a tool set is I think the right way to think about it. I don't know about you, Glenn.
Yeah, and I think it's, you do see it defined differently, right? And I think one almost wrong definition of it is it's a bunch of tools in a package, right? Right. Because the big piece for me is it's got to integrate. And it's not only got to integrate to external systems. There's a lot of talk about how you got to integrate to your ERP systems, to your CRM systems, different systems of record like that. But it's really got to integrate together, right? So you got to look at that product, that it's not just CMS, it's not just the document management, it's not commerce, it's not everything that's just kind of piled in and then you figure it out. That all has to integrate together, and that's a key part of the functionality of the product. So when you go to create the next digital experience in your organization, whether it's an intranet, extranet, customer self-service, that those tools are available, they work together. If it's commerce works well with the CMS and the document management system to provide that experience. So that's where I see it.
I think it's interesting the way that the market has expanded from individualized products to an all-in-one, and then now back towards purpose-built with proper integration. Right? And I think that the three of us at least are in agreement that the third version here is the right one, knowing that each tool is built to fulfill a particular action, and we're making sure that it works with the next, and works with the next, and work with the next. Because of that, I know that Liferay specifically is sort of modeling this into a platform as a service and software as a service, sort of migrating away from just this traditional DXP model. Is that something that you guys are consciously making the shift or responding to some of what the market is asking, of you specifically or of your competitors?
It could be a bit of both. I think we need to nod to the overall market trends and say that is the direction in which teams are going, and especially the people that have the say in buying are leaning toward more of a model in which it acts like a spigot in which they can turn it on and off in a SaaS model. But we certainly understand the value of all of the effort put forth in the last 10 to 15 years to build out these tool sets. It would be unfortunate if all of that advancement was lost in that transition. So we're hoping that we're able to deliver on both.
I like that.
Yeah, I would agree with Wes. And, if you look at the tool set again, I know we're focused on the customer, and you got to give the customer what they need, but there's also the other end of the spectrum, which is your developers and the IT department, right? So you talk about a DXP, you can't have them developing everything within that specific tool when maybe their skill set's outside of that. We talked about this earlier today from a JavaScript framework perspective, right? So they may want to work in React, or something, but then to just be able to call, the back end via Headless, whatever it is. And I think that's important because that's also going to help with that whole omni-channel focus, right?
Yep.
So if I want to create, it's not about mobile apps or anything. We talked about, specific companies using DXPs within a manufacturing facility. So maybe there's a screen within, the production line or smart device or something. Whatever the framework is, the UI or whatever, as long as it can has the open APIs and can pull it, integrate with Liferay or a DXP, that's going to be key. And so it's a little bit pleasing the customers, but also pleasing the developers and have them kind of bring their own front end.
Right. I mean, the marriage of an IT user and an end user, a marketing, business user, and then like you said, it's like even folks on the floor or in field service, looking at inventories in the same way. If that experience for all of those folks is the same, why not leverage what you have in place? You mentioned sort of one of these buzzwords, headless here. Is that where you think we're headed next? I mean, what comes after this? We're focused on personalization down to the individual user. We're focused on extensibility and making sure that we have proper tool sets in place. But inevitably, the next question becomes, well, what if I want to use X? Is this headless model? I mean, that I think is already sort of at a juncture where it might be just jargon, and nobody knows what it actually means.
Well, composable is also a term that's come up a lot recently. But between headless and composable, I would like to think that the goal is delivering the best value to all touch points, and really the way that those tools exist and why they exist is so that you can quickly, as a team, maybe even with less development than ever, deliver outcomes that work well in any way that the users are interacting with your services.
I like that.
Yeah, I think when you look at headless, for instance, I think a lot of companies, including ourselves, we were probably doing headless before just with open API sets, right? So we really started down that path to begin with. Our developers internally also saw that, we used to develop our own JavaScript framework that came, with our package, and you had to use that to,
Sure.
you could swap out to React or whatever, but it wasn't as easy. So to make it more headless, I would say, if that's the proper terming to use, we have definitely gone that route. I do think that's, the way we're going to go. It's interesting that Wes brought up composable, because I just had a conversation with a customer yesterday on my flight out about composable commerce. So it's
That's
really
interesting.
modularizing commerce and to be able to use portions of the commerce product like the inventory, the cart, the catalog, everything in a more composable manner to where the front end may look different here for different suppliers and stuff, more on a B2B focus, but composable is really starting to, I'm starting to hear that buzzword more. And again, I think that bleeds a little bit more from headless to being headless and just,
Headless
distributed.
plus.
Yeah.
We're not nearly headless,
Exactly.
Nick. Actually headless. It's interesting too. So we've seen a little bit of that. I work with a lot of our associations and healthcare, in those industries with our projects in that space, and they all have a core business system that runs most of what they do. Either sort of their EMR, on the healthcare side, or for associations, it's their AMS, Association Management System, and they're all going through the same exercises. I think these CMSs where there were 50 products that you needed and were required to run a business. Then these gargantuan companies tried to sell you this all-in-one, and now we're going back to a purpose-built, tool set with proper integration, and the commerce experience is one that's interesting there because a database system isn't going to do commerce well, right? And a lot of these folks are using a CMS that is not a commerce system. So now you're having to tell an organization that may be a little bit budget strapped, here's why commerce makes sense too. And you need another platform for that. So I think that the composable, where we're focused on, this module is something that we can tack on and poke here, is certainly interesting. The other side of that is we're starting to see, sort of alongside this headless, a little bit of both, where we're marrying those business users with a front end tool that they're comfortable using, and also providing a back end, developer or IT, tech focused solution, where we have a DXP delivering content through WordPress, for example, on the front end, via that open source. And so, have you guys seen any of that? I know we talked a little bit about that earlier today, but leveraging things that, it's technology that you would think are providing similar services, but for different purposes, right?
Lower maintenance,
yeah,
and avoid any duplication, kind of removal of silos, that whole discussion. And in maintaining your content in a way that authors are comfortable with the system, they can get to the stuff they need, they get the true benefit of the modern solution, DXP solution. But the place in which that content is then surfaced could be anything through those integrations, like you say, potentially WordPress. So I do think it comes up, Glenn.
Yeah, and I know we're portal and DXP, but content's key. You always hear that, right? And we understand that. We've had, I'd say, a minimal content management system to a more fully functional now, and the way I like to say that content is key is we're seeing that across even the additional products that are being pulled in, like commerce. We're seeing that around specific solutions that our customers are asking us for is how we talked about personalization. How can I personalize the content to fit these user needs in an inventory situation or
right.
in a purchasing situation. So I guess I'd answer that with. It went from CMS DXP to this DXP as a service, but ultimately it goes back to that content, and content's key. So
yeah, I mean we've seen a little bit of a resurgence here with things like WordPress on the open source side ourselves. I mean WordPress used to be a blogging platform that mom and pop shop had, and that was their website, and but we're seeing it more in the enterprise now in the architecture that we're describing, right, where there's these actual, I don't want to say actual because WordPress is a real thing, but the true productized offerings, SaaS or DXPs that are sort of the core of the architecture. WordPress is the front end because it's so flexible and because of the open source capacity to pull in from the community. What interests me about Liferay in particular is that is an open source tool, with community contributions, and so. It's interesting, and I'd like to hear your feedback on why you all felt that was the appropriate, or maybe not you guys, but the team, the appropriate route to take, knowing that, you probably over the years have had to fight a little bit uphill. Well, it's open source, that means it's unsecure. That battle, knowing that it's a full-blown DXP in that mode. Hopefully that makes some sense.
It does, and it is our heritage, and it was opened as an open source project in the year 2000, way back when, and those contributions help shape its future. And we still accept community contributions and review those contributions and make sure that they are a good fit for what we do. I will jump back really quickly, if I'm allowed, and say that WordPress has very little barrier of entry.
Yeah,
and
right.
It is a real thing. One of the most enjoyable jobs I had was giving back. I taught night classes in web design for 10 years.
Wow,
it was a lot of fun.
It's good karma.
I would like to think so. Yes, And part of that was that I got to teach basic HTML, CSS, but as soon as I got that part out of the way, I taught the students how to install WordPress, right? How to get it set up and work within a CMS, because there's very low barrier of entry. And there's the open source topic that we can continue to cover, but as we move toward SaaS, I think I would like to think the goal is just that, lowering the barrier of entry for us to provide a bigger set of tools to a larger audience.
Yeah.
It's really key to me. And I think it's even cooler that can be part of a community-driven project.
I like that a lot. Low barrier of entry. You're right.
Yeah. So I'm going to be biased on the community perception of this because I came from the community. That's
Sure.
how I got hired into Liferay. So we were using the Liferay software. I was a community member. My team was at least trying to make significant contributions or bug fixes, and certain things like that. So I saw the benefit of that. Moving into this role now and working for the company, open source is one of the primary reasons I'd say our success. We put that project out. I shouldn't say we. Brian Chan, our founder, put the project out on open source from the very beginning. Right, he created this as a content management system for his church. To be honest with you, he put it out on the open source market, and the thing skyrocketed. That's when open source was starting to take off. The hard part for us, as you mentioned before, was selling that to organizations because open source was not common, right, within. But it was easy to kind of come back with that too when they said that we don't use open source, and you ask them, are you using Tomcat or Apache? And they're like, well, yeah. And it's like, okay, you're using open source. So we had a lot of those conversations and a lot of legal negotiations. It was really hard. And I'll give kudos to Red Hat. Red Hat set the way for open source software, subscription software. We followed, similar to that model going forth. And that's been, I think, a huge part of our success.
Sure.
We still take community contributions. We offer on-prem all the way up to PaaS and SaaS, so we offer multiple different solutions. Open source, we definitely bleed probably more into the on-prem, but we're taking some of those ideas as well and moving that into our PaaS and SaaS product. I mean, our content management system was grown from a contribution made by one of our customers, not even a community. So when I say community, it's not just people like myself at the time that was sitting in a basement at a data center, coding. It's our customers, it's partners like you guys, that are contributing back to this, and it's just been awesome to watch it grow.
Yeah, the sort of going on your low barrier of entry. I mean, some of the things you can learn to do with some of this technology now on YouTube. You have 12-year-olds that are writing incredible mobile apps and crazy web apps moving forward. I think that opening it up and offering an opportunity to see what the world has to offer is certainly interesting. As we think about where these products are being shaped and moving forward. So, as we think about wrapping up here, one of the things that I want to leave with is sort of 5 years from now, what's next? We're moving into this. All the models we've spoken about here, but if you had to be a betting person and say this is where we're going, after this little wave, what would that look like? And maybe if the answer is who the hell knows, then that's the answer. But wanted to think, what's next? What's coming up?
Continual improvements to agility and speed of implementation, and that is in all senses of the word, both in authoring the experience as well as hosting it, making sure it's online and stable and secure. And those ideas of configuration over customization. And really our focus, and I think Glenn will back me up on this, really it's about enabling those business users to do what they need without having to bring in an IT staff in all cases. We really want the IT staff of companies to focus on maybe more important needs, migrating legacy technologies or focusing on integrations and things. So I think that'll continue to grow and improve as all platforms really modernize over the next 5 years.
Love it. Glenn?
I'd have to say in two areas I see the next 5 years. So I think AI and machine learning is really going to progress. Analytics is much like I said, content is key, analytics is key, which drives that content. I still think a lot of that's in its infancy. We have an analytics tool. Google has an analytics tool. They do a lot of the similar things plus different things.
Sure.
So I think that will grow. You'll see that more tightly integrated. The other thing that I'm seeing quite a bit, and we talked about this earlier as well, is AR, VR, right?
Yeah.
So there's that augmented reality. There's the whole metaverse. I'll tell you the honest truth. When I heard the metaverse and what was going on, and I saw the Facebook commercials and everything, I was like, "This, what's this? This is not going to last." And now I'm sitting here talking. I think that could eventually be integrated into these digital experience platforms because we've gone away from brick and mortar. We're going virtual, and I think we're going to go more virtual.
I completely agree on the AR, VR. I mean, I was reading an article yesterday that $1 million home got sold in the metaverse, in the Facebook metaverse. I mean, what are we doing? It's unbelievable. Well, really appreciate both of you joining us today, Wes and Glenn. Thank you guys for the visit. Thanks for hopping on. Thank you for tuning into the future by listening to the Lessons for Tomorrow podcast. For more information on the topics we discussed today, check out the description of this episode. If you want us to cover a topic or submit any of the feedback, email us at lessonsfortomorrow@americaneagle.com and let us know. Be sure to follow the podcast wherever you listen to them. Stay up to date with us. Like, subscribe, review. While you're at us, give us a rating. Like I said, share this podcast with others. Prepare them for the future. And don't forget to follow us on social media. This episode is brought to you by the AmericanEagle.com studios. I am your guest host, Stephen LaGow, and you'll be back with Tim to catch you in the next lesson. Thanks, everyone.